when I was at school, I lived in Bracknell Newtown in the southeast, and my and my father and my father's father and my mother's father, all trade unionists. You know, going right back to quite probably before there were trade unions. You know, that was that cool. But there's a history of like, you know, sort of socialism, you know, in the family. And it was probably socialism with a small s, because I know that like my dad and my granddad were sort of, you know, a little bit, you know, uncomfortable with the fact that I joined militant and, you know, things like that. And so obviously it's a bit like religion, that you don't sometimes you'd have a scrap with the National Front and things, but quite often you'd have a scrap with the SWP as well. It's a bit like Life of Brian, isn't it, where you've got the Judean National People's Front and People's National Front of Judea and things like that.
The Methodists and the Pentecostals kicking off outside.
Yeah. That'd be a fight to see, wouldn't it?
I'd buy ringside seat for that.
Just fucking boring each other to death. You know.
Pentecostals win and down.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'll go up over there.
I don't even really know what a Pentecostal is. I know it's something to do with the church.
Oranges are not the only fruit.
That was them, was it?
Yeah.
Great album. Anyway, so I just did the cover. So I had this kind of socialist kind of background, and at the sort of tender age of sort of 17, or when I was thinking, like, when I was, you know, about going to go to university and things. Even then, even though it's kind of quite like naively kind of imagined, but I found it really sort of suffocating living in the southeast. Because Bracknell Newtown and sort of Reading and all those kind of like, you know, sort of places, even unemployed would vote Tory because they believed in the fact that kind of they were better than people in the north, and they weren't. Unemployed people was another name for people who lived in the north. But if you're unemployed in the south, you just didn't have a job. And you were perhaps working on a project or in between jobs, but you certainly weren't unemployed, and certainly not on the dole, darling. Anyway, so I found it really, really kind of sort of a bit like Stepford Wives, and it, you know, it's a massive generalisation, as much as to say that kind of, you know, people in the north, you know, are more genuine, and you know, it's not necessarily true, but it suited me to think that at the time. And I wanted to go somewhere that was far enough away from home, not that because I didn't, you know, love my mum and dad. You've guessed already that I'm my only child, but it wasn't that I didn't. But I just want, if I was going to go away, I wanted to sort of go away to be away and do something different. Now I also I'd read somewhere that Sheffield was the Socialist Republic of South Yorkshire, which was before the traitor Clegg, and stop.
No, let it all out. He's a traitor.
He's a fucking traitor. What's his fucking bollocks kicking off? Anyway, that's just a personal opinion, and you can all choose your own party to vote for. Fucking cheese and wine
Who are you
party.
gonna vote for?
But anyway, so anyway, I went to Sheffield because I liked the sort of Sound of Clock, DBA, Vice Versa, Cabaret Voltaire, early Human League on John Peel, and I liked a lot of that stuff, and I kind of thought that I'd kind of been a bit disappointed that the Clash's Sten Guns in Knightsbridge was actually just a pose, and it wasn't really going to happen. So I thought I'll go sort of somewhere where there might be a bit of, you know, sort of socialist action.
How old were you at this point?
17. You know,
It's
weight of the
amazing
world.
the decisions that you made based upon the stuff you hear on the radio.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Not anymore.
So anyway, I went to Sheffield University, and I was because you know, I wanted to be a good little socialist. I thought I'd study. I quite enjoyed social history at school, because, you know, you learnt about real people and not just dates and things, and all that. That kind of seemed to fit. And then I went to register on the first day, and the problem was, and this is how, kind of like you say, how the course of your life is kind of really, you know, determined by small little incidents and things. When I left Bracknell and went to Sheffield, my then girlfriend, from around the same, from Ascot, around Bracknell and Ascot, she went to Manchester. But you know, and this is the truth for young people. This is the truth. There were no such thing as mobile phones. I know it's hard to believe, but there weren't. So so basically, if you said, I'll see you, okay, I'll come over and I'll meet you at Piccadilly Station at whatever time, you kind of had to. You couldn't just go like, oh, I'm going to be late or whatever. And you couldn't be late if, you know, just because, either because you were scared of getting shit kicked out of you, or because you were just a gentleman, and, you know, whatever, or you know, partner. Could be the other way around, of course. Anyway, so I went to sign up for social history, and I suddenly thought, you know what, I can't do this for another 3 years. I've done it for O-level, I've done it for A-level. You know, how much more can I learn? I mean, I know the Tolpuddle Martyrs' names. I don't need to know their birth signs and, like, you know, their favourite fucking Take That album or something. So basically, I kind of thought, I'm not doing that. And then I looked around, and because the school I went to was kind of a smallish grammar school, they only did sort of, you know, the basic things. There was no sort of ologies there. There was, you know, it was just nothing sort of radical like that. It was, you know, reading, writing, and all that stuff. And so it was sociology, and I'd seen like a couple of plays on TV where the sociologists, and I'd heard that sort of some of these sociologists at sort of some London universities spent a lot of time, you know, sort of going on marches and having sit-ins, and I thought, that sounds great. I could do that for 3 years. That sounds better. And you had to do 3 things. So then I thought, then psychology I wouldn't have thought I'd do psychology because I didn't really read it. I just thought, oh, psychology, that'd be all right. And then I thought I could psychoanalyse the people in sociology. It all fits in. Understand the people who are doing the thing, why they do it, and, you know, and all that stuff. And I didn't realise that actually first year psychology is just like a year's worth of neurobiology. And that's my worst subject was biology, just like just so squeamish about anything. Even if I sort of think in terms of like there's a skeleton in my, I'm just like, oh God, no. I'm starting to feel sick already just thinking about it. I pass out if I have injections. It's just and the thought of anything.
We can work on that later.
We can, yeah. Thank you. How much?
75 an hour.
Okay, right.
Over 18 weeks.
That's fantastic. What, literally every hour for 18 weeks?
Yeah.
That's good value. That's really good. I'm going to do that. If someone can make a note of that. Anyway, so anyway, I went. By the time I'd done all this, I looked at. It might have been a watch. It might have been a clock. You don't know either way, and I can't remember. I looked at the time, and I realised I only had about like 15 minutes to get down from registration to the station to get to Manchester. So I quickly looked around. And the only one that didn't have a queue was philosophy. And I thought, it's only for a year. So I did that.
God, I love it when that happens.
It's fantastic. But really, all my teachers at school had said, you should do English, and I'd done a lot of writing, and I'd even, I was going to name drop then, I forgot the name. Tom Stoppard's wife.
Miriam Stoppard.
Miriam Stoppard, yeah, I knew a similarity in the names. And so basically, she was a friend of my girlfriend who went to Manchester, mother, and Tom had shown some interest in my work. I look back now and realise it was just sort of partly being polite and that, but, you know, at the time I thought it was great. But anyway, because all my teachers, this will give you a measure of like the kind of the spikers, because all my teachers said, you know, you should do English, definitely do English. I didn't do English, you know. So, but anyway, I got halfway through the first term of doing sociology and realised that we weren't going to go on strike, we weren't going to have a sit-in, we weren't doing any of that stuff. And then I also realised that actually the play that I was thinking of was the history man, not the sociology man.
Yeah.
So I was like, that's fucking torn it, hasn't it? So I went and I said, can I change to do English? And they said, yeah. But and first they said yes, but then there was like some spikes or peaks in the intake for universities. So they said, but you've got to take the rest of this year off and then come back. I was like, all right. And then they said, oh no, actually, you've got to take this year off and then the next year, then come back. And I thought, I don't want to be like one of the sort of eternal students, and like, you know, I can still read books, even if I'm not studying English. So, and once I kind of realised that, I thought I don't really need to do English. So that's how I did philosophy. So it wasn't, and actually philosophy was really good because it's a bit like doing English, but with added value and added content. And, you know, so rather than, you know, my English, I always made my English teacher kind of we were reading The Rainbow, and it's just like, you know, it was, I can't even remember what bit it was, but it's like, there was something where, like, it's bound to be something to do with sex if it's D.H. Lawrence, but he was going like, what? So he's talking about the ruddy earth between his under his feet, and what do you think he's really saying? And it's like, well, he's talking about walking across a muddy field, sir. He said, no, Anderson, he's talking about sex. And I was like, no. This well-thumbed page, page 34, that's where he's talking about sex. You can see, you'll just flick it open and it's an old school textbook. That's where he's talking about sex. It's like a bit like page 23 of the Nuffield Science course, volume 9, page 23, picture a naked man and a naked woman. They weren't doing anything. It was just purely like, kind of, this is the naked body, this is the human body. But, you know, when you're like, kind of, you know, 11 before the internet, when you're like 11 or 12, that's gold. That's like that's like finding an escort or a some other like sort of jazz mag, you know, and under your dad's shed. Or was that just me? I don't know. I look at my dad and think that that must have been there for years, because he definitely didn't put that there. And philosophy, we were talking about philosophy, weren't we? And So basically, so philosophy, I kind of did it and it was interesting. It was a great thing to do for me because I was always too busy to go to lectures. So I was either writing for the university newspaper, and then I went on to do my own fanzine, and I was in bands, and I promoted bands, and I promoted clubs and gigs and things, which is why I started doing the design. So that's really kind of how I got there. So philosophy didn't really lead me into design, but the reason when I teach, I try and get. We're supposed to recommend books before, you recommend books before a workshop, and I try to recommend sort of things which are more like about philosophy or psychology or something, rather than like, you know, go and look at a book of record covers or something. Because I think that the one thing, or many things, but you know, but philosophy is something that's if you let it, it enriches your life. I mean, it also enables you to prove logically that black is white and always win an argument over a client. And that's why you should study philosophy if you're a designer. The problem I've found is that kind of proving that you're right doesn't necessarily make for a good relationship. And actually the ones where you admit that the client, I've realised after sort of, you know, going bust, that actually kind of if you just sort of say to the client, oh, that's a great idea, just too possessive. That was my idea, it's not your idea, you're just the client, I'm the creative. Hello?
Did that lose you did that lose you a lot of work?
Is that what?
Did that lose you a lot of work, that spikiness?
Yeah, but only from people that I didn't want to work with anyway.